The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is From Grief to Gratitude.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Wade Franson. This is Created in the Image of God. I'm back for another episode, and I have an amazing guest in the studio, as we always do. But Stephen Ferrara and I have been catching up after our initial meetings and discussing what we're going to cover today. The depth of experience that Stephen brings to this conversation is amazing. I hope you will enjoy it and get as much out of it as I already have and look forward to getting. Let me tell you a little bit about Stephen. He's a spiritual teacher, author, and former CEO of a very large financial services firm in the Northeast. And his path to self-discovery, awareness, spiritual consciousness came with suffering, the loss of a son, a wife, and years meditating, studying, and journaling with what eventually became an acclaimed book titled From Grief to Gratitude, A New Paradigm on Death. Welcome to the studio, Stephen.
Thank you, Wade. Happy to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and anyone who's had those soul-changing, soul-sculpting experiences, and who analyzes them through a divine lens, relying on the Word of God, the Holy Spirit, to understand what it all means and why, brings so much to a conversation. So I'm really looking forward to having this. And as the audience always likes to do, and myself as well, is to really get to know the real you and to help us understand sort of how and why God was using you as clay, not only for yourself, but for those around you, and shaping and molding your life. With your permission, of course, and with your submission over time. So tell us your original creation story. Where were you born? Who were your parents? What were the circumstances that formed, shaped, and molded you on that potter's spinning wheel in those early years?
Yeah, thank you, Wade. I had a very simple, really, I guess you'd consider a poor, economic upbringing. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, in a part of town that was kind of where all the poor Italians immigrated to. And my dad was a musician. My mom was a kind of a part-time dancer, but mostly a homemaker. So I came from a very artsy family. My grandparents were ballroom dancers, but, that was back in the day where, a lot of people didn't make money. Nobody knew they were poor, but we all were. But I had a wonderful upbringing, very loving parents, lived in the same house with my grandparents and aunt and uncle. The Ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey is right outside the Newark airport. There was a trucking firm on one side, a factory on the other. So, life was just as it was, but my home was always filled with love every Sunday, which was an Italian tradition. The whole family would come to our house, and my grandmother and grandfather lived in the basement. And she had a big kitchen, and she, somehow, made a pot of spaghetti and some meatballs, and it fed everybody. There would be 20 of us, and somehow with the pot of spaghetti and a couple of meatballs, she fed us all, and we were all, full and very happy, and it was a wonderful time of life. I grew up, and what I really remember about most of my life is I couldn't wait to get out of my kid age. I didn't really enjoy high school. I was really looking forward to get out of it. at 17, I was always looking for something. And my dad was also what I'd consider to be a real spiritual seeker. And he exposed me to various teachings that he was looking into. He had found something called the Concept Therapy Institute, which became the basis for much of my initial foundational learning. And it's a spiritual study which really takes from all of the many religions and compiles a spiritual course of study in a way to live your life, and both physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of our life. I took Transcendental Meditation at 17. I was always, as I say, seeking and looking for things. When I turned 18, back in those days where I came from, and really back in those early 70s, everybody didn't go to college like they do today. I opted to go right into business, started knocking on doors selling life insurance at 18 years old. I was fortunate that in 1973, President Nixon at the time did two things that helped shape my life. He called off the draft, which I was very happy about. I was a lover and not a fighter, didn't want to go to the Vietnam War, which was still raging at the time. And he also made the age of majority 18, so I could actually enter my adult life as soon as I graduated high school. I got an insurance license, started selling life insurance door to door. And my dad, who was looking to make money on the side because he was a musician and not making a ton of money, was doing the same thing. He had built a little small neighborhood office that he serviced, our neighborhood with insurance products. Anyway, that was the early 70s. My career began to grow. The financial industry really boomed through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and I kind of just rode that wave. And the firm began to take off, and we hired many advisors. And the firm really became one of the larger firms, certainly in the Northeast. But my life has always been dedicated to spirituality. I was teaching always for the Concept Therapy Institute over a 25 year period. I was always studying. I was always reading spiritual information, feeling that there was something within me that needed to be expressed. And got married at a young age, had my son when I was 26, Christopher, and then had a daughter 4 years later, and had a third daughter quite a few years after that. Our life was wonderful. My career was growing. We kind of, as I say, rode that wave, built beautiful home, and life was wonderful. From where I came from to where we were, I could have never have dreamt that, my life could be that good. On the outside, I had everything I could ever want. Inside is what I was always looking for and trying to understand and be more in touch with. And, so in 2004, which is the year that my son at age 23 died in a car accident, my son was the closest person to me by far in my life. He and I were bonded, I believe, before he was born, and certainly now after he died. We did everything together. He had joined my business. We were in business together. He'd end the sentences that I'd start and vice versa. We just had this bond at a level that I would say was an unconditional love. When he died in a car accident, I was 49 years old. He was 23. And that's when, with all of the studying, all the meditating, and everything I'd ever done in my life, I just came crashing down and questioned everything. The early days and months, I was just so angry at the universe, angry at God, angry at anybody I could be angry at, that I could just, I used to be a runner. I'd run through my neighborhood just yelling at the top of my lungs at anything, because there was just such grief that I was expressing as anger. I questioned, as I say, everything I'd ever learned in my entire life, and I wasn't finding answers. But the thing I did begin to do was journal, and I journaled from the first day after my son passed away, and I've journaled for 20 years. And that's really where my book emerged from, which I'll talk obviously more about shortly. But in terms of my life, sold my business only 5 years ago, and built a successor team, was able to hand it over to them. They bought me out just before, or just actually when COVID started, which was great because business has changed so much. I'm glad not to be a part of that world anymore. But that gave me the opportunity to have some time to look back at all of these journals that I had written. I had a bookshelf of them, and I began to read through them, and I began to learn the life lessons and see the life lessons that my journaling brought out. I had never read them back, but as I did read them back, I started to see these tremendous life lessons that shaped the way I was able to continue to grow and move forward after this almost unimaginable thing occurred, which was the death of my son so tragically. Subsequently, my wife, a few years later, passed away. She was the cornerstone of our family. She's really the person that had all the strength that carried us through those early months and even years after my son passed away. So my wife dying at a young age, and due to an illness that just, within a few weeks of her diagnosis, she died, again, threw my world upside down. But I had learned so much about death, and I'd learned so much really about life at a very deep level, not at the level, all that I'd studied in my life, I was learning, but in the experiences of life, certainly of the death of my son and then my wife, was where all of this became real, and the experiences of life were what were teaching me. So just to end that, I've really overall can't be more grateful for the life I've had, starting with parents that loved me, and moving through a life where I had a wonderful wife, three gorgeous and wonderful children. And I just could not be more grateful for all that life has given me, even with the twists and turns and the curveballs that have been thrown, as we all have. But I've learned how to continue to move forward in a healthy way and truly live my life, I feel, from a peaceful and joyful place.
Wow, I'm just sitting here drinking in your story, obviously reflecting on it, sort of reliving a couple of things in my life that have some similarities. And I just want to thank you for sharing that story. It really helps us, in a nutshell, understand who you are, as a star, a light, sort of, traveling through space, the trajectory that you're on, part of the whole experience, right? Everything in space orbits around everything else, right? Everything is connected there and here. And to learn about your journey, and to understand that, you as a tiny little piece of that leaven out there in New Jersey doing your thing, this is a part of the whole human experience. And I really appreciate you sharing that story. I want to ask a couple of questions. First of all, just to clarify, so you had one son and two daughters. Is that what I understood? Okay.
Yes.
And then your relationship with your son was incredibly close, and critical and pivotal to your experience. What about your daughters? What's your relationship like with them?
My daughters are wonderful. My one daughter is married with a beautiful grandchild that she's given us. And she does well. She still lives up in New Jersey, and we couldn't have a more close relationship. She's the one that's taught me so much, because Danielle, her name is, and she's 40 years old. She's probably closest to me in personality, and we'd bang heads when she was a teenager, but she's become a wonderful, beautiful mom and an individual, and we have a great relationship. My younger daughter, Alexandria, she's 29. She's getting married later this year, and just
congratulations.
Yeah, really great. But yeah, we have very close relationships. The three of us truly help each other, because we're all still going through it. I mean, they lost their mom, which is huge. And I'll never, ever minimize the tremendous impact of especially girls losing their mom. Yeah. And, and when my one daughter just had her child, and my other daughter's getting married, this is where a mom is so involved, and her not being here, it is rough. So I'm trying to always do the best I can to, be the best parent I can, but they're wonderful children. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you. And then the final question. So in terms of your spiritual growth, awareness, you mentioned drawing inspiration from a variety of religious sources. So I'll share just a little bit. I'm a former minister in a sect, you might say, that was very devout. that at one time, well, remember this sect, or call it a small denomination, ripped right down the middle. And at that time, I resigned from the ministry to separate my faith from my paycheck, but also because both sides wanted me to join them. And the fact that there was this split showed me that neither side was what we thought we were when we were together. When we were together, we thought we were a special group of people with a special purpose and a special divine calling. I'm not saying that wasn't true, but the degree to which we believed it was true, the degree to which there was a degree of exclusivity there, it wasn't true, right? In some sense, it was true. We're all called with a purpose to give something particular, something individual, something special. And in that sense, to quote, Dash from The Incredibles, Mom, if everyone's special, nobody's special, right? And it's a cone, right? What's the sound of one hand clapping? How are you special if everyone's special? Well, God is capable of making all of us special, right? So the point is, my journey has been that opening, that awareness. I want to understand a little bit more about that part of your spiritual journey. So were you ever part of a group that was like the church? And the reason is not to criticize Christianity at all, because this is a human condition.
Yes.
Christians have been condemning each other to hell for millennia, over the pickiest little things. And that obviously is not of God. That part of it is not of God. We might think that we're defending or upholding some doctrine by condemning somebody else to hell. But the truth is, Jesus said, do not judge. Whatever standard of judgment you use will be used against you. In the divine judgment, God won't judge us based on this law or that law. He will judge us based on the standard we use to judge others. It's the most fair and equitable judgment possible. And it's only possible for God to have this degree of judgment, this degree of justice. But Satan, whether you believe Satan is real or a metaphor, is the accuser of the brethren. Satan is the one who brings the accusations before the judge.
Right.
And so if we're judging others and condemning them to hell, whose work are we doing? The work of God or the work of the devil? So that's the realization that I've come to. And along that way, I've opened up to, so I just want to understand, I share that by way of framing the question. So how does that look? How does that work, or what does it look like for you when you say, I've drawn from a variety of religious experiences or traditions?
Yeah, my childhood upbringing was in the Catholic religion, the Roman Catholic religion, and I even went to a Catholic grammar school. And that's where I began to form my feelings that, similar to what you're saying, this religion really beat us up with guilt and sin and things that just didn't feel right. In fact, I can remember one time coming home crying my eyes out. I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and in Catholic religion class, the nun who was teaching told us that no one other than Catholics will ever get to heaven. And my best friend at the time was a fellow named Paul. And I love this Paul, but he was a Jewish boy. And I cried my eyes out. I could still cry today because he wasn't going to be able to go to heaven. And so it really changed my thinking about the way I need to look at my spiritual life. And so a lot of questions came up. And I was an altar boy at the time, so I was really into the whole Catholic thing. But I guess when I began to be able to think a little bit more for myself, I began to realize there had to be a lot more. And that's when, as I mentioned before, my father was a real seeker, and he found this institute that was started by a doctor, and he was actually a chiropractor. And back in the early days of chiropractic, they were very in tune with what they call the innate power within us, which was probably another name for the God within us, and how that was the healing power. And all chiropractic was to do was to adjust you so that that flow of healing God can come through you. And that just made a lot of sense to me. And the entire course of study is really, as I said, became an important basis for me to continue to form my life spiritually. I understood that there were principles, there were ways of being able to make choices in your life so that you could come from either love, the God side, or come from fear, which is the Satan side, or the ego side even. And then I found authors like David Hawkins. I don't know if, he wrote Power versus Force and so many other books, and Eckhart Tolle, more current, Michael Singer, A Course in Miracles, various books that really kind of just resonated with me and helped my spiritual essence be able to come out more and more. So that was kind of my journey, and it's still my journey, and maybe more my journey than ever, because that's all that I'm committed to at this point in my life, is my ongoing journey.
Well, thank you so much for unpacking that part of it for me and for the audience. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about your book, your life work, what you're doing now, how you're applying these things in service to the divine and in service to our fellow man and woman and humanity as a whole. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Created in the Image of God with Stephen Ferrara.
Death is something we're taught to fear, to see as an ending, as something that takes away what we love. But what if it could be understood differently? What if loss didn't mean disconnection, but transformation? This book explores a deeper way of looking at grief, not as something to escape, but as something that can lead to awareness, presence, and meaning. Each chapter begins with a deeply personal journal entry, drawn from years of reflection, offering an honest look into raw emotion and the quiet insights that can emerge from it. Through these moments, the book shares a path shaped by experience, where love doesn't disappear with death, but continues in new and unexpected ways. For anyone navigating loss, facing life's challenges, or searching for healing and inner peace, this is an invitation to see things differently. Grief to Gratitude. Order your copy today.
Welcome back. I'm here with Stephen Ferrara. This is Creating the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities. We're now going to talk about Stephen's book, how he took his journals into a finished product and what he's been doing with that and the work that he does helping others. Stephen.
Yes, thank you. I look forward to talking about it.
All right. So tell us about that process from the journal to the book.
Yes, I had never intended to write a book. I'm not an author by training. I've written a lot in my business life. I've spoken a lot in my business life, but never considered myself by any means an author. As I mentioned in the previous segment, I had been journaling for 20 years. And when I sold my business and had time to look back and see that I had this huge bookshelf of journals, I picked up the first one and just started reading. There was no intention to write the book, but I was taking excerpts as I was reading. And it started with that very raw emotion of grief that you go through. I just was expressing how I felt, and it became, journaling was such a therapeutic exercise for me, because when you journal, you're doing it just as a stream of consciousness of what's coming out of you. You're not talking to someone where they're responding or anything. It's just a stream of consciousness, and so those early weeks were so much emotion that I was able to put out on those pages. But in those emotions, I was even seeing that I realized there had to be a better way of dealing with this. And at one point, as I read through my journals, I saw that I had hit what I'd consider to be rock bottom, where I felt that, I just can't handle this in the way I'm handling it. There has to be a better way. And a dim little light bulb went on in my head, and realized, yeah, there can be a better way of dealing with this. And I started to, in my journals, see the life lessons that were occurring. Things like I began to write about, what if I could see this experience I'm going through from my son's side and see this as something that is his experience that I can support. As as my son, I always supported him in whatever he felt he wanted to do in his life that would be, good for him. And why would I not support him after his death if this was part of his ongoing journey? Now, that only occurred after I got to a point where I accepted that this universe doesn't make mistakes. One of the very important life lessons as well that I learned, and I believe fully, is that life is not here to torture us, no matter what the challenge of life is, including the loss of a child, which is one of the toughest. But life's not here to torture us, it's here to teach us. And when I began to shift that mindset and realize that there had to be something as traumatic as this could not have happened for me to just go in the corner and cry for the rest of my life as a grieving father. I almost felt like that would have disrespected the enormity of this tragedy or of this traumatic experience. And so I decided that this was going to become something that I was going to really understand and learn and make a difference in my life. And again, this is where, as I read back through the journaling, I saw these turning points. I saw how looking at it from his side took the focus off of me and put it on his journey. And as a loving father, I supported his journey. And his journey, I don't know where it goes, but I love him, and I accept that this is what life's destiny was for him, to not live beyond 23. And so I support him in wherever his journey continues to go. And what that began to do is, rather than me looking at this experience in a way where I felt, poor little me, or, what could have been. I could have been a grandfather. He would have been my partner in business. We played golf together. I could have, I should have. I didn't look at it that way anymore. I began to look at it as what can be in our relationship. And I saw my journaling begin to transition into what can be in our relationship. We could have an ongoing and a growing love-based relationship. I just needed to learn a bit of a different language, so to speak. It wasn't going to be where you and I are talking this way, or certainly not going to be where he and I could be physically in the same place talking or give each other a hug. But there is a different way. And what it began to teach me is that a relationship based in love is not limited to the physical or the mental aspects of our life. A love-based relationship with anyone in our life, spouse, children, friends, family, is at a much deeper level. We don't see it that way all the time when we're both in our human forms, but when someone that you loved to that extent passes on and they don't have their human form anymore, you realize that the love never ended. The love I share with Christopher is the love that I feel for him. So if I continue to share my love and I continue to look at this as an ongoing and growing relationship, then who knows where this could go. And where it went for me is I eventually began to see my journaling turn into where I always signed off as love forever and eternity, your dad. And then I started to add into it, your dad and spiritual partner. And I was starting to see myself and Christopher as partners who were moving through life together, helping each other. He just didn't have his form, and I did. And I was realizing that he's truly my spiritual partner. Love is something, and life is something that really is eternal. I talk about this in the book where, sometimes we say life and death are the opposites, but, the opposite of death is birth. Birth and death are opposites. Life is eternal. So birth and death is like a little parenthesis in time where we get to spend 80 or 100 years in this human experience, or maybe in my son's case, 23 years. It's a little small parenthesis in this eternal time period or time of life. Life just continues on eternally. So again, the journaling started to bring out all of these many lessons. I started to understand more and more that life is unfolding. And it's been unfolding for millions or billions of years, really, when it comes to the universe. Humans have been here for millions of years. Life has just unfolded. It's unfolded perfectly. And yet, all of a sudden, now that I'm here for an 80 or 100-year period, who am I to disagree or expect life to ask me whether I agree with its unfolding or whether I have an opinion about its unfolding or I'm going to judge how life is unfolding? Life is just doing what it does. Our responsibility is to use our power of choice, our God-given power to choose, and then choose how we're going to respond to how life unfolds. No matter what the challenge may be, we can always respond to life either in a loving way or in a fearful way. And that's our responsibility, and it's really our superpower, is that we have the ability to choose how we want to experience our life. So those are just a couple of the lessons that I talk about. I've got so many more in the book, but I'll stop here for a moment to see if you had anything else that you wanted to ask in particular.
Well, I do, and thank you so much for expounding on that perspective. The audience knows I have this sun and moon behind me, which constantly grounds me in that, in actually the twin creation stories that we find in the Bible. And there are other stories that we can access. I'm not saying that they're the only ones, and certainly the way that I interpret them, or they've been interpreted, is not the only way to interpret them. I believe there are many ways to interpret those symbols and derive meaning from them. But the point that I'm making is there are two creation stories. One is the cosmic view of God. Well, there's the different analysis of the book of Genesis, the creation story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. There's this sense that, and the Spirit of God moved, there's a sense that maybe there was something pre-existing, and God really was bringing order out of chaos. But the point is, it's a cosmic view of a supreme being existing outside of time and space, outside of all human experience, and then creating time and space itself and every dimension that we don't even know about yet. And then you have this second creation story in which that same omnipotent, omniscient, all the omni words, God, bends down in the dust and with his own hands forms and shapes us, and then breathes mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, life into us, and then takes one of our ribs, and from that fashions another version of us to be different from us, but a companion to us. So my point being, I like to ground everything in those stories because they're so powerful, they're so deep, and they're so rich. And you and I were talking earlier on, before the show, about that story, about how Adam and Eve in that garden that was created, first Eve and then Adam, chose to disobey the commandment not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and at that moment in time take to themselves the prerogative of doing it their own way, doing the thing that God always wanted, which was that we would become like God, but doing it our own way. And so as you were talking about choice, freedom, consciousness, that's what I derived from that story. Not a fall, not the original sin, not those theological constructs that have been derived from it,
Right.
but your description of the reality that we have freedom of choice. And the only way that that was possible was to allow separation, to allow differentiation. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so God created an opportunity for that differentiation that ultimately allowed you to conceive a son, for your wife to bring forth that son, and for you to lose that son. But I'm conscious of how you framed it, that son is now traveling on a journey, that you've accepted and allowed. In the same way that God said, okay, yes, you may eat of that tree. I said you may not, but I'm obviously not stopping you. It's the difference between may I and can I. Dad, can I have a chocolate? Yes, you can, but you may not, but you can.
Yes, I agree.
I want to just ground it in that Bible story, even as you're talking about a reality in a more expanded kind of way.
Absolutely. And I agree completely. The story line and the examples and the symbolism is so clear as you describe it. And in my book, the storyline of what occurred is also what grounds my book in sharing all of what we went through as I did as an individual, as we did as a family, and but the real meaning behind it is what the book is about, the true lessons in life that I learned. And as I moved through this experience, I began to feel within myself that this love that I have for my son is something at such a deep level, what I'd consider to be that spiritual level, where it is, as I mentioned before, it's unending, it is ongoing, and it continues to grow. And if we allow it, it's something that we will actually allow us to be more in touch with our own spiritual essence. I began to see that my relationship with my son Christopher, and later with my wife after she passed away, they provided windows for me to be able to go through and be more in touch with my own spiritual reality, or my soul, if you want to call it that, where that was the only place that our relationship existed anymore, was at that spiritual, deep soul level. But that's also, as again I mentioned before, where all relationships in love are based. We just don't think about it all the time because we're seeing the person right in front of us. But when they're not there physically, we can be more in touch with understanding that this relationship is still as true as it's ever been. Now, that doesn't mean that sadness doesn't come. It doesn't mean that these grief type feelings will still not come. It doesn't take those things away. But what does occur is, as I got more in touch with my spiritual essence, or my soul, as I said, I began to realize that these emotions that were passing through are not me. And in fact, if I am able to observe them, and as I'm talking about them, they must not be me, because if they were me, I couldn't talk about them. But because I'm looking at them and observing them, like I remember one day, I just felt such a deep feeling of sadness. I was standing at my home. I was looking out a window. We have a sunroom. And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, this feeling is just so heavy. It just feels so sad. And for whatever reason, as I'm looking outside, and it was a beautiful sunny day, it occurred to me that if I'm talking about this feeling, then I'm not this feeling. I don't have to identify as a sad person. I have sadness moving through me, but I don't have to identify with that. I don't have to talk about it and build a storyline about it and talk to everybody else and look for sympathy. That's probably the worst thing I could have ever done. I never, in fact, thank God I'm not designed that way. I never wanted the sympathy. And even though people wanted to give you your condolences and everything else, and it's wonderful and it's the best that we know how to do in our society, it's really not what you need. You don't need sympathy. You need, if anything, an openness and an understanding. But for me, I began to realize that those emotions moving through me are not me. I don't have to identify as a sad father. I just need to allow them to flow. I can observe them. They don't feel good as they're moving through, but I knew that they would move through. It might take a minute, an hour, a day, but I could continue to move forward with my life, and eventually that feeling would just evaporate. And it's not who I am. I'm something so far greater than that. And again, that's where the relationship with my son at that spiritual level made me understand I'm something so far greater than these thoughts and emotions that move through me. Thoughts and emotions are, just things that move through. Who knows where they come from? They might be just being a product of the human race, or they might be based in experiences and programs that I picked up along the way. It's not who I am. I'm so far greater than that. And that's where what we were talking about before, I found that I could always choose how I am going to respond to life and as it's coming through me. So, these were just important lessons. And I guess the basic one when it comes to life flowing is I realized that I could either allow life to flow, whether it felt good or didn't feel good at the time. I can allow life to flow. If I were to resist life, if I began to say, oh, why am I so sad? Or I don't want to feel sad, and I suppressed it or pushed it away, that just made it bigger. But if I allowed it to just flow through, then life would just continue to unfold. And I was able to live my life and continue to move forward and enjoy my life and not identify with some of those emotions that would sometimes flow through.
Well, thank you so much. I want to make two quick comments. This is just so deep, so fascinating. We're quickly using up all the time. But two quick comments. As you were talking about that soul, that spirit relationship with what we might call the next world, the next life. We have another commercial break coming up real quick. I believe, not being a prophet, I believe that the commercial that we will air will be for this book called Facets of One. And I want to give a little background on that book. The contents of the book were developed through the experience of my wife and I working in a nursing home, and we're collaborating with something called the Royal Falcon Foundation to put this book out. And it was frankly the experience of meeting every Sunday for going on 3 years, working with these people in a nursing home as a sort of unofficial, non-titled chaplain. And just being with them and praying with them and discussing about their life's experiences. And over the course of that time, several of the participants would pass on into the next life. And the group would feel a surge of spiritual energy each time this happened, that they were still participating and providing energy from the other side. And the inspiration as to how to crystallize this book, Facets of One, came from that experience. So I wanted to just quickly tee that up for the what's coming next in the commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to have to sadly quickly wrap this up, but I want to hear what's next for you. Where are you growing next? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Stephen Ferrara.
The bond between humans and animals has existed for centuries. They walk beside us, work with us, trust us. Yet, in a world shaped by human hands, their well-being is often an afterthought. Robert Eccles invites us to see animals not as property, but as lives that matter. Through faith, philosophy, and action for our friends, the animals offers a path to a kinder world. Change begins in the choices we make, how we care, how we advocate, how we protect them. Every small act of kindness creates a ripple. The way we treat animals shapes the world we share. For Our Friends the Animals by Robert Eccles. Available now.
Welcome back to the concluding segment of today's show with Stephen Ferrara. Given the richness of the discussion, we're almost out of time. So Stephen, where are you growing next, and what are your final words to the audience?
Yeah, thank you, Wade. I am more committed than ever. At my age of 70, I feel so fortunate that, I'm in a position in life where I can focus totally on my continued internal growth. My focus on a daily basis is to live from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. We live in a world today where we're all overstimulated with all of the many devices and with the news and with everything else going on. And that's all outside in. That's coming from the outside. And we don't even realize how much we carry on our shoulders if we engage with that. I don't listen to the news. That's just my choice. I use my devices very little. But what I do realize is that I've got to continue to nurture the inside of me to be the best that I can be. As I move forward, I do lecturing. I'm considering writing a second book. I do workshops. I focus on podcasts and webinars with various organizations that have invited me in. And my purpose is really to help wherever I can, and specifically when it comes to grief, to help people understand that you do not have to suffer unnecessarily. There is a pathway that will lead you to joy and gratitude in your life.
So check out on Amazon or go into your local bookstore. I'm sure you can order it there. From Grief to Gratitude, A New Paradigm on Death by Stephen Ferrara. You see his name in the spelling. I hope everyone there will check out that book. Is there anything else, anywhere else where people should reach out to you or engage with you somehow?
Yes, thank you. My website is stephenferrara.com. So very simple, just add a .com after my name, all, without spaces, and you'll come to my website, which will have other information and other things that you'll be able to access if you're interested.
Awesome. And if you're interested, Stephen, I would love to invite you to come back on the show and follow up and dive a little deeper into some of the topics that we touched on today. For the rest of you, I'll leave with my tagline: you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. Stay tuned for the sneak peek of what's coming next week, and we'll see you all there, same time, same place. For the audience at this time slot, it's 8 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning. We also have a live show on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central. See you all there, and may God be with you.
Next week on Created in the Image of God. Sunday, May 24th at 7 a.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Chinyere Egbe, economist and professor at Medgar Evers College. He explores the intersection of finance, education, and economic development, and how data-driven thinking can expand access and opportunity, from building programs in financial economics to advancing opportunity and empowerment in Central Brooklyn and beyond. And then on Tuesday, May 26th at 8 p.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews R.J. Snell, Director of Academic Programs at the Witherspoon Institute and Editor-in-Chief of Public Discourse. He reflects on questions of truth, ethics, and the human person, and how we make sense of meaning in a fragmented age, from moral responsibility and education to the deeper pursuit of clarity, purpose, and the good life. Join us live this week, Tuesday and Sunday, Created in the Image of God.